Suradhane Apat Swayambhuvantaram.
Anyone else? Okay, word for word translation. Tata, after that. Saptame, the seventh in the line. Akutyam, in the womb of Akuti. Ruche, by Prajapati Ruchi. Yagya, the Lord's incarnation as Yagya. Abhyajayata, advented. Sa, he. Yama Adyai, with Yama and others. Suraganai, with demigods. Apat, ruled. Swayambhuva Antaram, the change of the period of Swayambhuva Manu. Translation. The seventh incarnation was Yagya, the son of Prajapati Ruchi and his wife Akuti. He controlled the period during the change of the Swayambhuva Manu and was assisted by demigods such as his son Yama. Purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. The administrative posts occupied by the demigods for maintaining the regulations of the material world are offered to the highly elevated pious living beings. When there is a scarcity of such pious living beings, the Lord incarnates himself as Brahma, Prajapati, Indra, etc., and takes up the charge. During the period of Swayambhuva Manu, the present period is of Vivaswata Manu, there was no suitable living being who could occupy the post of Indra, the king of the Indraloka, heaven planet. The Lord himself at that time became Indra, assisted by his own sons like Yama and other demigods. Lord Yagya ruled the administration of the universal affairs. Tata saptama akutyam ruchir yagyo vyajayata sayamadhyay suraganar apatswayam bhuvantaram. The seventh incarnation was Yagya, the son of Prajapati Ruchi and his wife Akuti. He controlled the period during the change of the Swayambhuva Manu and was assisted by demigods such as his son Yama. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shri Bhakti Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nea Vishesha Shalivadi Paschata Deshatarine. Hare Krishna, thank you everybody for coming. Hope everybody's doing well. Also, before I start, or as part of my starting, a couple of weeks ago I mentioned my fondness for this chapter of the Bhagavatam and my experience with it in the past. And I actually wanted to thank everyone who's been giving class the past couple of weeks, because they've been really wonderful classes, and it's really helped me, really allowed me to re-enter into this favorite chapter, which honestly I haven't read in a long time. So with the help of all the nice classes and discussion, it's really helping me get back into it, and I'm really loving it. Thank you very much to everybody. Last time I spoke, I also spoke about the somewhat idiosyncratic nature of this list of avatars, how it contains all types from the Purusha avatars and Shaktivesh and direct avatars of Vishnu, full avatars and partial avatars and Manvantar avatars today, and so many, as compared with the more familiar list of the Dasavatar Stotram, which are all these very familiar and one might even say fun Leela avatars. So some of these are a little less known. And I've been thinking over the past couple of weeks about the nature of this list, what it means, what is Sutta Goswami, what is Vyasadeva trying to accomplish? So here's one thought I had, and I'll express that in a little story. In the very earliest days of ISKCON, in the end of November of 1966. ISKCON was small on 26 2nd Avenue. There had been, Prabhupada had held his first couple of initiations, so they were initiated devotees, but these are all people who had been practicing devotional service for weeks or months. And any one of us, listening here today, at least in terms of, raw knowledge and familiarity, know more about Krishna consciousness than any of those brand new devotees did at that time. So, and they had a simple morning program with kirtan, and then everyone would take their beads out, and Prabhupada and the devotees, they would chant one round together. So one morning after chanting their japa together, one round, Prabhupada took out an unfamiliar book, an old book from India, bound in red cloth. And he told the devotees here, he said, now, because you're a little bit advanced, I'm going to teach you something new. I'm going to read today from this new book, Chaitanya Charitamrita. Now, none of the devotees had heard of Chaitanya Charitamrita. They had heard a little bit about who Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was, but they were unfamiliar with Chaitanya Charitamrita. And each morning, Prabhupada started reading from it, and he started telling the story of Rupa and Sanatana Goswami leaving their work for the Muslim government and coming to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and Sanatana Goswami getting thrown in jail and bribing the jailer to get out. And it was very fun and adventurous story for the devotees, hearing about Sanatana Goswami escaping and traveling long distance to come to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And then Prabhupada came to the teachings of Sanatana Goswami in the 20th chapter of the Madhya Lila. And he told them, be patient as I present this. It is revolutionary, but just be patient and you'll understand. So he started explaining the teachings of Sanatana Goswami, and a lot of that dealt with the different avatars. So one day, Prabhupada was reading from that chapter and explaining, starting with text 221, and I'll read a little bit of that. My dear Sanatan, just hear from me as I tell you how the different Vishnu Murtis hold their weapons, beginning with the disc, and how they are named differently according to the placement of the weapons in their hands. The procedure for counting begins with the lower right hand and goes to the upper right hand, the upper left hand, and the lower left hand. Lord Vishnu is named according to the order of the weapons he holds in his hand. According to the Siddhartha Samhita, there are 24 forms of Lord Vishnu. First, I shall describe, according to the opinions of that book, the location of the weapons, beginning with the disc. And he would start reading when the lower left hand holds the chakra, and the upper left hand holds this, and the upper right hand holds this, and the lower right hand holds that. That Vishnu is known as Vasudeva. And when the position is different, he's known as Vamana. And when the position is different, he's known as this or that. So he was reading this and explaining this. And two of the devotees who were listening at that time, Satsvarup and Umapati, they both were in the habit of, they had notebooks and they would take notes during Srila Prabhupada's class. So they were taking notes about this when the chakra, Padma, Gada, Shanka are like this, then his name is this Vishnu, and when it's in this position, it's a different Vishnu. And Prabhupada told them, you don't need to take notes about this. You don't have to know these details. And then a few days later, they came to a different section of that Madhya Lila. And this is about 20 verses later, and I'll read this a little bit. Text 243. I have already described the pastime and prakash forms. Now please hear about the different personal expansions. The first personal expansion is Sankarshan, and the others are incarnations like the fish incarnation. Sankarshan is an expansion of the Purusha or Vishnu. The incarnations such as Matsya, the fish incarnation, appear in different yugas for different pastimes. There are 6 types of incarnations of Krishna. One comprises the incarnations of Vishnu, Purusha avatars, and another comprises the incarnations meant for the performance of pastimes, Leela avatars. There are incarnations that control the material qualities, guna avatars, incarnations who appear during the reign of each Manu, Manvantar avatars, incarnations in different millenniums, Yuga avatars, and incarnations of empowered living entities, Shaktivesha avatars. And then at that point, Prabhupada said to Satsarup and Umapati, said, this you should take notes on. So this means that learning these different avatars, there are so many details of Krishna consciousness that we may or may not absorb. But Prabhupada considered this learning the different types of avatars something worthy of study, worthy of memorizing and learning. And I'm surmising that is what is behind this list of avatars. We know how important this chapter is. It contains the Paribhas Sutra, the defining shloka of Srimad Bhagavatam, Ete Chamsa Kala Punsam, Krishna's tu Bhagavan Swayam, that after this long list of all different avatars, that Krishna is the source of them all. He's the supreme personality of Godhead above all of them. Even above the Vishnu avatars, Krishna is supreme. So that's such an important verse and conclusive verse that allows us to understand the entire Srimad Bhagavatam. But to understand that, we need to understand the avatars. As Prabhupada says early in the Bhagavatam, in a purport of the very first verse, he says that one needs to understand both the categories and the substance. And by understanding the categories, one comes to the substance. So these words, category and substance, are technical terms from the philosophy of Aristotle, actually. Prabhupada was a philosophy student. I think he even graduated from Scottish Churches College with a degree in philosophy, if I'm remembering correctly. So he learned these technical terms, that the categories are items or things that are dependent or contingent in their existence upon something else. And the substance is the original thing that is completely independent in its existence and is not contingent on anything else. So Prabhupada says there in that very first verse, by understanding the categories, then we could understand the substance. So by studying the avatars, we can come to understand Avatari Krishna, the source of all the other incarnations. And I think that's what Sutta Goswami is explaining here. And in particular, he's including all of these, I wouldn't say esoteric, but all of these lesser known incarnations, so that we get a broad scope of what the different types of avatars are. For example, this Yagya, who is the son of Akuti and Ruchi, is a Manvantara avatar. So this is another one of the 6 types of avatars mentioned in Lord Chaitanya's teachings to Sanatana Goswami. So he's including the Manvantara avatar from the previous Manu, Swayambhuva Manu. He could have included the Manvantara avatar of our present Manu, who is Vaivaswata Manu, who happens to be Vamanadev, but Vamanadev is a Manvantara avatar, and he's also a Leela avatar, famous Leela avatar, Vamanadev. So perhaps they were choosing one who is more exclusively known as a Manvantara avatar to round out this entire list that Sutta Goswami is giving us. So this is today's avatar. His name is Yagya, and he's the son of Akuti and Ruchi, and he's the 7th in this particular list. And there's not a gigantic amount of information about him, but to start off examining who he is, I thought we could look at his family. He's coming in the family of Swayambhuva Manu. And Swayambhuva Manu is such an important and amazing devotee, an amazing person, the father of mankind, the giver of Manu Samhita, the laws for all mankind, the creator of all the different lineages and types of living entities populating the universe, and a great Mahajan. Bhagavatam says, Dharman tu sakshat Bhagavat pranitam. that Dharma, real religion, is given directly by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So if we want to be religious, we want to follow real religion, we follow the religion given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But that verse goes on, Navai Vidor Rishayo, Napi Deva. But the rishis don't know what this religion is. The great sages, they don't know, Napi Deva, and neither do the demigods. They don't really know what this real religion is. Nasiddha Mukhya, even the best of the siddhas, the best of the perfected beings don't know. And what to speak of Asura, Manushya, Vidyadhara, and Charanadaya. Even what to speak of lower beings like Asuras, or ordinary human beings, or lesser demigods like Charanas and Vidyadharas. They don't know what this real religion is. So how are we to know? Swayambhu Narada Shambhu Komara Kapilo Manu Pralada Janaka Bhishma Bali Vyasaki Vayam. If you want to know what the actual truth of religion is, as given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, we learn it from these great Mahajans. Swayambhu is Lord Brahma, Narada Muni, who is in this list of avatars as an empowered incarnation. Shambhu, Lord Shiva, who is one of the Guna avatars. Kumara, the 4 Kumaras who are also in this list. Kapila, who is also in this chapter list. And Manu, Swayambhuva Manu, who is not specifically mentioned in this list, but many of his offspring and descendants are. So Swayambhuva Manu is such an important authority in terms of the universal distribution of Bhakti Yoga, of Sanatana Dharma. And what a family. He's so great. And not only great, his entire family is amazing, actually. He had 3 daughters, Akuti, Prashuti, and Devahuti. The Huti sisters he had. Akuti, Prashuti, and Devahuti. 3 daughters and 2 sons, Uttanapad and Priyavrata. And we all know these names. These are such important, amazingly big, important personalities in the Srimad Bhagavatam and in all the Vedas. And the eldest daughter, Akuti, was given in marriage to the sage and Prajapati Ruchi, who was mentioned today. The daughter Prashuti was given in marriage to the Prajapati Daksha. Daksha had his problems, he had his issues, but his family lineage is amazing. They had a daughter, Morti, I'm trying to remember, maybe the daughter's name Morti, and that daughter had as a child the twin sons Nara and Narayan, who is another incarnation mentioned in this list. So coming down from Swayambhuva Manu, we have the Nara Narayan Rishi. From his other daughter, his youngest daughter, Devahuti, we heard how she was given to the sage Kardama Muni, and they had the child Kapila, another very important incarnation in this list and that we discussed. And today, Akuti was given to the sage Ruchi. And when Swayambhuva Manu gave his daughter to the sage Ruchi, he said, "You're a great sage, a great Prajapati, take my daughter, populate the universe. But if you have a son, I want you to give that son to me to raise." Because Swayambhuva Manu, as intelligent as he is, perhaps he saw the other incarnations coming from his other daughters, or maybe through some more mystical source, he knew that an incarnation of Vishnu was coming. So he requested, "You have a son, you give that son to me to raise." So they got married and they had twin children. This Yagya, who was an incarnation, empowered incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and a daughter, Dakshina, who was an incarnation of Lakshmi Devi. So this Dakshina was raised by Akuti and Ruchi, and Swayambhuva Manu raised Yagya, who was an incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So what an amazing family this is. And then Uttanapad had as his son Dhruva, and so many, Dhruva was the son of Uttanapad, who was such a famous person in Prahlada. He's not one of the Mahajans, and future Manus were in that line, and King Prithu, another avatar, was in that line. So what an amazing family. Oh, the Haryashvas also came in that line from King Uttanapad. And Priyavrata, who had in his line Lord Rishabhadev, another incarnation, and Bharat Maharaj and the Navayogendras, who play an important part in the Bhagavatam teachings later in the 11th or 12th cantos of the Bhagavatam. So what an amazing family this is, starting from Swayambhuva Manu, and all of these empowered devotees and avatars are appearing. So this is the situation in which Yajna appeared. And Prabhupada mentions in some other places in the Bhagavatam, he was known as Yajna. Sometimes he was referred to as Suyajna, or Yajna Murti, or Yajna Pati. So this great important person, he had one son named Suyama. So therefore in today's verse, it's described that his son was Yama and other demigods. This is not, as far as I could tell, the current, who we know as Yamaraj in our current roster of demigods. This current Yamaraj, he's the son of Vaivaswata Manu, and there's a whole story about his appearance, and his sister is Yamuna. So it's a different person than that, but his sons were all these also great, important, powerful persons who went on to become the roster of major demigods at that time. So he was being raised by Swayambhuva Manu. In the 8th canto, Parikshit Maharaj is speaking to Shukadeva, and he says, please, I want to hear all about the Manus and all about the Manvantaras and the avatars and all of this knowledge about the running of the universe. So there, it's specifically mentioned, Parikshit Maharaj replies about this lineage from Swayambhuva Manu, that specifically Yajna and his cousin Kapiladev specifically came to teach knowledge and Dharma and Jnana to society at large. Dharma, Jnana, Upadesha, Artam, they give the essence of real Dharma and real knowledge for the benefit of the world. So Swayambhuva Manu was king. He was raising his grandson, but raising him like a son, Yajna. And Swayambhuva Manu himself was such a great devotee that although he was the most opulent, with the most, I guess you would say, political power in the whole universe, running everything and the king of everything, yet at the same time, he was so renounced that he had not the least bit of attachment for his opulent materialistic life. So at one point, he left his great kingdom of Barhismati, and he and his good wife Satarupa, they went to the forest to meditate on the Supreme Personality of Godhead and practice meditation and devotional service, because that was their real desire in life. So he went to the forest with his wife, performed very severe austerities and very intense devotional meditation. A part of his meditation went like this. This is from the 8th canto. Lord Manu said, the Supreme Living Being has created this material world of animation. It is not that he was created by the material world. When everything is silent, the Supreme Being stays awake as a witness. The living entity does not know him, but he knows everything. Within this universe, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in his super soul feature, is present everywhere, wherever there are animate or inanimate beings. Therefore, one should accept only that which is allotted to him, and one should not desire to infringe upon the property of others. Imagine these words coming from a present-day politician. Although the Supreme Personality of Godhead constantly watches the activities of the world, no one sees him. However, one should not think that because no one sees him, he does not see. for his power to see is never diminished. Therefore, everyone should worship the super soul who always stays with the individual soul as a friend. So this is the meditation of Manu in the forest. And while he's like that, meditating in a complete trance of devotion on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, some Rakshasas happened to wander by in that part of the forest. And they saw him meditating and thought, oh, here's someone in trance. This is literally for the Rakshasas, this is a free lunch. He's a great Kshatriya, but he's not going to fight. He has no weapons. He's in trance. He can't oppose us. We'll immediately devour him. So these band of Rakshasas went up to devour Swayambhuva Manu. And immediately on the scene came his son Yagya, along with his 12 important sons. And they protected Swayambhuva Manu in his meditation and immediately slaughtered all of those evil man-eating Rakshasas. So eventually Swayambhuva Manu came out of his trance, saw what had happened. He was very pleased with being protected by his adopted son, grandson. So he appointed him as the Indra for that particular Yuga cycle. Because as Prabhupada explains in the purport, and also explained several purports ago in this chapter, that the demigods from Brahma, Indra, and others are generally very highly qualified jiva souls. But according to the Lord's will, or if there isn't a suitable person, because it's not very easy to become that qualified, Prabhupada said that to become Lord Brahma, you have to practice Dharma very rigidly and very perfectly without even the slightest fault for 100 lifetimes to attain the post of Lord Brahma. So not so easy to do. And if there's no qualified person in the universe, then the Lord himself may take that position. So this Yagya, the grandson of Swayambhuva Manu, the son of Ruchi and Akuti, became the Indra and ruled the universe very effectively and compassionately and wonderfully ruled the universe. So this is all I really know about the life and the pastimes and the activities of this great incarnation Yagya. Again, he's specifically a Manvantara, which very nicely rounds out this list of avatars. So we have every type of avatar, every category of avatar concluded, some very well known, some lesser known, but all of them empowered either directly or indirectly by the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna. And we understand them, the categories, which leads us to understand Krishna, the substance, the source of them all. And in that way, we advance in our devotion to Lord Krishna himself. So just a little bit more about this. This incarnation is named Yagya. And we know in the Vedic tradition that the names given to persons is significant. Just like the boy sage Dhruva Maharaj. His name is Dhruva. The name Dhruva literally means fixed or firm or firmly rooted. So this is a characteristic of Dhruva Maharaj. He was so firm in his determination that even he was just a little boy, but he was determined, no, I'm going to go to the forest. I'm going to do this severe austerity and meditation. He was so determined. And he was so fixed and so firmly rooted that when he was meditating, the weight of his meditation actually tilted the entire universe. So Dhruva was Dhruva. Or a great king like Yudhishthira. Yudhishthira means one who is fixed in battle. So he's a Kshatriya, so he has a name indicating how firm and determined and expert he was in the arts of Yudha, in the arts of fighting, in the arts of war, as a Kshatriya should be. And there are other examples. What are some other? Another grandchild of Swayambhuva Manu was Durvasa Muni, who was the Actually, Durvasa Muni was the brother of Dattatreya, who we heard about a couple of days ago. So Durvasa, Dur means bad or hard or difficult, and Vasa means residence, or Vasa means Vach or Vak, like voice or speaking. So Durvasa means someone who it is very difficult to live with, very difficult to associate with. Or Durvach, one whose speaking is very hard, very harsh. So we know how hard it is to associate with Durvasa Muni. If you associate with Durvasa Muni, there's a better than even chance that you're going to offend him and end up getting cursed. Because also Durvasa, that his speech was also very harsh. He was always on a hair trigger to curse anyone. So Vedic names are important, and this incarnation Yagya means that he is, to some degree, we can associate him with this Vedic process of Yagya, which is so important in understanding Krishna consciousness. He's called Yagya, he's called Suyagya, which means excellent Yagya, or Yagya Morti, the very form or personification of Yagya, or Yagyapati, the Lord of all Yagya. So this is this personality. And in fact, Swayambhuva Manu's kingdom of Barhismati was founded when, during an incarnation of Varahadev. We know Varahadev dove deep into the ocean, and when he came out, if we've seen when a dog comes out of the water and he shakes his body to remove the water, so when Lord Varahadev came out of the ocean and shook his body, and the water that fell from his body fell at this place, Barhismati, and it became a very pious and excellent and amazing place. So amazing that it became the capital for the king of the entire creation, Swayambhuva Manu. And when Lord Varaha shook his body, and some of the hairs of his divine boar form flew off of his body from that shaking and landed on the ground, those hairs took root and grew as kusha grass. And we know that kusha grass in traditional ritualistic yagya is very important for performing sacrifices, and yogis use kusha grass mats in their meditation. So important. So Lord Varahadev is also very intimately associated with yagya. So yagya, what is this yagya? Yagyartat karmano nyacha lokoyam karma bandhana tadartam karma konteya mukta sangha samachara. That work has to be performed. Everyone's working like an ass. But yagyartat karmano. Yagyartat karmano means your work should be yagya. And yagya arta, because yagya is also another name of Vishnu, yagya arta karmana means your work should be done for the benefit of Lord Vishnu. This is literally what, in its highest sense, yagya means. It's not just throwing some ghee or throwing some firewood or throwing some grains. That's just the externals of yagya. The real meaning of yagya is this yagya arta karmana, that your work is offered to Lord Krishna. This is actual yagya. And if you don't do that, tadartam karma konteya what's that? Lokoyam karma bandhana. If you don't do that, then your work is simply bondage. But if you offer it to Krishna, mukta sangha samachara, then your work becomes the source of your liberation. Sahayagya prajashishva purovacha prajapati anena prasavishyadvam eshavos ishti ishtakamaduk. The next verse is the Lord speaking that the Prajapati, the source of all creation and of all living beings, said long ago at the time of creation, he said, I've sent off all the generations of people, and along with them, I've given them the process of yagya. And by this process of yagya, everything you want can be received. Eshavos twishta kamaduk. That this process of yagya is kamaduk. Kamaduk means that which fulfills all your desires. Literally, kamaduk means Kama is desire, and duk means cow. So Kamaduk literally, etymologically, means the Surabhi cows that fulfill all desires. So we all have desires in this world. We all have to work in this world. And if we worship Krishna, then Esha Vostrishta Kamaduk, then all of our desires will be fulfilled. And if we don't, then that will not happen. If we approach, instead of approaching Krishna, we simply work hard on our own, we'll be frustrated. If we want to approach the demigods separate from Krishna, we'll be frustrated. Antavatu palantesham. Why? Because the fruits given by the demigods, antavat, they have an end. They're full of misery because they can only give temporary benefits. So the result is going to be frustration. Antavat tu palantesham tadbhavat alpamedasam. And people who do this, alpamedasam means you have very little brain substance. It means you're dumb. You're someone who approaches the demigods or someone who doesn't approach Krishna for this process of yajna is less intelligent. And they're actually not serving their best interest because they could only get temporary fruits from it. Devan deva yajo yanti, mad bhakta yanti mamapi. Doing yajna to the demigods can only give these temporary fruits, but mad bhakta yanti mamapi, but the devotees who perform yajna to me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they come back to the spiritual world because all their desires are fulfilled. Kamaduk. Again, Kamaduk means the Surabhi cows. So where do we find these Surabhi cows? Chintamani prakarasad masu kalpa vriksha laksha vitesha surbir abhapalayantam Lakshmi sahasra satasambhrama sevyamanam govindam adipurusham tamaham bhajami. This is the characteristic of the spiritual world, not just the spiritual world, specifically Goloka Vrindavan. Chintamani prakarasad masu, that the land, all the land and every stone and every grain of sand and every dust is Chintamani. Chintamani means spiritual gem, which is capable of fulfilling any desire you have. This is Chintamani stone. Chintamani prakasad masu kalpa vriksha. And what's the kalpa vriksha? Every tree, every plant, every creeper, there is kalpa vriksha, meaning it's a tree that's capable of fulfilling any desire and giving you anything you want. Prabhupada said, here in this world, if you want an apple, you have to go to an apple tree, and it has to be in season, and it has to be fertilized, and it has to not be worm-eaten, and maybe you can get an apple. But in the spiritual world, you go to any tree, and you could get an apple, or you could get a mango, or you could get a jackfruit, or you could get any fruit you want from it, or indeed any desire you want from it in Goloka Vrindavan. Chintamani prakasad masu kalpa vriksha laksha vritesha surabir adapalayantam. And there's the Surabhi cows, which give so much milk that the pasturing grounds are muddied by their milk. And they can also fulfill any desire. Anything you desire can be fulfilled. Who was it? Was it Vashishta Muni who had the Surabhi cow and was using it to fulfill all his desires and maintain his ashram and feed guests? And that's just a Surabhi cow in this world. So just imagine the Surabhi cows in the spiritual world. Chintamani prakasad masu kalpa vriksha laksha vritesha surabir abhapalayantam. And Lakshmi sahasra satasambhrama sevyamanam. And there's Lakshmis. People are so fond of worshiping Lakshmi in this world. Just like all the demigods, and especially Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune. Everyone wants a fortune, so they worship Lakshmi, thinking they could get some little bit of fortune. But Lakshmi herself is doing austerities, performing austerities to get the benediction to be able to serve Krishna. And Lakshmi Sahasra Sata, that there's hundreds of thousands, unlimited Lakshmis in the spiritual world. So any desire you have can be fulfilled best of all and most perfectly of all and in the most complete and unlimited way only in Goloka Vrindavan by the Chintamani stones, the Kalpa Vriksha, the unlimited Surabhi cows, and the goddesses of fortune there. So this is our understanding of yajna, that we worship Krishna, we give everything to Krishna, we have some desire. If we just give everything to Krishna, then everything will be fulfilled in the most perfect way. In the material world, when we get our desires fulfilled, those desires are not extinguished. Fulfilling our desires in the material world is like pouring gasoline on a fire. It feeds the fire and simply increases the flame, increases the heat, increases the passion. But in the spiritual world, those desires are actually fulfilled because it's fulfilling the innermost desire of the jiva, Jiver Srupai Krishna Nityadas, which is to be the eternal servant of Krishna. And if that desire isn't fulfilled and enacted, then no other desire will never be fulfilled in any other way. Because when you do yajna, when you offer to Krishna, Krishna offers everything, but most of all, he offers himself. Because this is what the devotee wants. Swayambhuva Manu gave his daughter away, and there was work to be done populating the universe, but he wanted Krishna. He said, give me your son, because he wanted Krishna. And if we do sacrifice, yajna, not ritualistic yajna, but yajna in the sense of devoting our entire lives to Krishna, then we're actually given Krishna in return, that Krishna gives himself to us. And when you have Krishna, who is Janmadhyasya Yataha, the source of everything, the source of all the incarnations, and the source of all the material energy, and the source of ourselves, and the maintainer of everything, and the destroyer of everything. When you have Krishna, you literally have everything. And in this way, this is the only thing that can actually satisfy us. So this is a little bit about what we can understand from this incarnation of yajna, from the great devotees and Prajapatis, Akuti and Ruchi, from the great Manu and great Mahajan Swayambhuva Manu, all of whom have dedicated their lives to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and ultimately giving us this Bhagavatam and this list of incarnations, and the conclusion that Krishna is the source of them all for this purpose, to remind us and teach us and mold us into who we're meant to be, the eternal servants of Krishna, the eternal lovers of Krishna. And then Krishna is ours. Krishna is our only possession. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. We can have some comments, some discussion.
Oh, you're speaking yagna, so the yagna for the Kali Yuga, the Sankirtan yagna.
Yes, best yajna of all.
Best
Also Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, what's that, japa something, I can't remember the Sanskrit, japa yagyosme, that the chanting of the holy names, of all yajna, I am the yajna of the chanting of the holy names. I'm sorry for interrupting. Go on, please.
Yeah, that's what it says. That's one of the main yagna, because we hear this name that and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came.
Yes.
And Prabhupada did this yagna sankirtana prior. So.
Yes. Yajna sankirtana prior. Yajanti hu Srimada. Yes, that's a very nice point. We have some rituals in Krishna consciousness. What is it? Ravindra Sri Prabhu told me that he was doing Prabhupada was doing a fire sacrifice, and Ravindra Sri Prabhu asked him, is this important? Is this necessary? And Prabhupada replied, we are not unceremonious. So we have ceremonies, we have fire sacrifice, we have rituals, we have rules and regulations. But the real sacrifice, of course, is chanting the holy name, especially in this Kali Yuga. You quoted that nice Yajanti, Yagyai Sankirtanaya Prayar, Yajanti Sumedasa. And again, Sumedasa, those who are intelligent know what this process of yagya is. And those who are not so intelligent will neglect this process of yagya, especially the chanting of the holy names. Nice point, thank you. Anything else?
Hare Krishna. I was wondering when you're explaining the meaning of different names of Yudhisthira, Durvasa Muni, where were you getting the reference from?
I'm sorry, say that again, please.
Where were you getting the reference from? What this name means, and you were explaining the detail of it?
From a Sanskrit dictionary. That in Sanskrit dictionary, Dhruva means firm and fixed. Yudhishthir means Yudha, means fighting, and Sthira means fixed or determined. So someone who is fixed in fighting. Durvasa. I think Prabhupada may have explained about the name Durvasa, but I'm not certain about that. But this is just an ordinary sort of Sanskrit, etymology. So the name doesn't mean everything, but the name is often indicative. Just like Prabhupada did say, for example, about Prahlad Maharaj. Prahlad means Pratishta Rupena Alad. Alad means ecstasy. And Prahlad means the highest transcendental ecstasy. So this name indicates that Prahlad Maharaj, as the great devotee in Mahajan, is always fixed in the highest devotional ecstasy of worshiping the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That one, at least specifically, Srila Prabhupada did analyze like that. But then there are many cases like that in the Shastra of persons whose names actually mean something.
I had heard that Parikshit, Parikshit saw Krishna while he was in the womb. So whenever he sat on the lap, by his grandfather's lap, he would look at everybody. Pariksha means to examine. So he would constantly examine to see, is this Krishna, is this Krishna?
Yes, excellent example. And that's one that also Prabhupada did explain. Thank you for that. Yes, great example.
Can I add a little bit more to that question?
I'm sorry?
Well, no, Drona Prabhu is going first.
Okay.
You go, Drona Prabhu. I wanted to say something else about the name.
No, please go ahead. I was going to follow up on, I had a question about the naming also. Okay. Please go ahead.
I was thinking giving name to children is actually very important to have. And I remember growing up when children were born, they don't just give any name or make up a name. They will go to some kind of pandit, and then it was done. And then the name, and I remember Dinabandhu Prabhu talking about now people make name, give name of movie star, and some name have no meaning. He said, but before you used to give name according to and you give almost thinking like my child will live up to that name. And then of course in devotee, we give our name, our children name, and like our son is called Raja. We are calling Raja Krishna. So that help us remind of Krishna. And also I remember, this is a Prabhupada story, how one person had a son who was blind, but his name Padmalochana. But even in that sense, he will be, that's not exactly, but I think it's to me, I got that point very interesting.
Yeah.
The name,
What to speak Pachamil.
Right. And also, even like you were explaining about Durvasa, he was almost so true to his name, and you just see it. I thought it was very interesting, the name and the connection with the people, and a name you expect, I don't know. Anyways, that's what I wanted. I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, it's a nice point. We can't expect it necessarily to have a mystical effect that I named my son Vraja Krishna, so he's going to, become a Vraja Bhakta in this life or whatever, who knows. But it's a hope, it's an aspiration. It's good for the child and it's good for the parents also, like Ajamil, who named his son Narayan. So yes, that's a nice thing, a nice point. And all of the names we give are some version of Krishna Das or Krishna Dasi. Yes, Drona Prabhu.
That was actually really good. It pretty much answered my question. I guess the only thing they say, were they named in the examples that you gave by astrologers, and the astrologers could foresee that these would be the kind of the lives that they would live, or was it more of like kind of like a prophecy, kind of like the parents, like we were saying, like the parents would hope that Yudhisthira would turn out to be like this? Or was it that like an astrologer basically said his life will be like this and therefore his name should be Yudhisthira?
That's an interesting question. I honestly don't know the answer. It could be one or the other, or it could just be some, divine arrangement. The only example I could think of is the naming of Krishna and Balaram by
Gargamuni.
But yes, by Gargamuni in secret, when he actually had some divine knowledge of their past and their future, and he gave them suitable names. But other than that, I couldn't say for sure. With these great personalities in the Bhagavatam, there's all sorts of divine arrangements behind the scenes that, could possibly be there, but I couldn't say for sure. And in the past, of course, these great astrologers were there who conceivably did have some knowledge about what the person would be or how they would turn out. So that's possible also, but I couldn't definitively say.
Oh, follow up the name giving. What about, we got a name, birth name, then when we take initiation, we get another name. So is a spiritual master gave us a name, so we have to live up to that name or something?
Yeah, absolutely. It may not be exactly, the name may not exactly be our destiny, but the sense is there. I still remember from at the time of my initiation, when I got called up and received my beads, Satsarup Maharaj said to me, "Your name is Acharya Das. That means you have to serve all of the acharyas, and in that way serve your spiritual master." So, I'm not, particularly in my life serving any big acharyas, but the sentiment or the sense of that name is something that I've remembered and tried to retain, that I'm serving the acharyas, I'm trying to follow the acharyas. So there is some sense of destiny there, but also sometimes it's just sometimes it may just be a nice devotional name. Just like my wife was telling me yesterday, that Prabhupada would sometimes ask his disciples to pick names for initiations. Just like Mother Akuti, who is Dina Bandhu's wife, she told me that Prabhupada asked one devotee, picks 3 women's names for the upcoming initiation. And the devotee didn't know what names to choose. Then he remembered he had just been reading in the Bhagavatam about Akuti, Prashuti, and Devahuti, so he suggested those. And Mother Akuti got her name that way. So it's definitely meaningful and it's significant. And to whatever degree we can take the name itself as a source of inspiration, but the name might not be destiny in every single aspect of that.
Thank you, Acharya Prabhu.
Thank you, Hare Krishna. Any other discussion?
We have 2 more hands up, Ram Sham Prabhu and Mother Vatsala.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. As usual, lecture and session was quite fine, Prabhuji, and you covered so many nice points. And so this, when we see the verse, Prabhuji, like it talks about the 7th incarnation as Yagna. So first, just wanted to clarify, this Yagna is the name just arbitrarily given as a Yagna, or it's the Yagna which is the Vishnu, the austerity or Yagna or sacrifice we perform, which goes to the Vishnu. So this sacrifice, what we perform, it goes to this Yagna, and this yagna is the Vishnu, or how can be conceived or how can be understood, Prabhuji?
As far as I know, Yagya was the actual given name at the birth of this incarnation. Yagya in general is a name of Vishnu. It's one of the Vishnu Sahasranam is Yagya. And for those of us who are Krishna bhaktas, we know that Vishnu is an incarnation of Krishna. So when we think of Yagya, we can think directly of Krishna in Vrindavan. So all are applicable, depending on the mood of the devotee. They're all applicable. It can refer to this particular person, this particular incarnation, or including Varaha, who is sometimes referred to as Yagya, or it could refer to Vishnu in general, who is also referred to as Yagya. When it says in Bhagavad Gita, Yagyartho Karmano, Yagya Artha Kamana means, Prabhupada says in the purport, Yagya means Vishnu. Or for us as devotees, we know that Vishnu is simply the representative of our ultimate Lord, Lord Krishna. So we could, according to the devotee, you could think of it in whichever way is relevant and conducive at that time. They're all applicable. Just like Prabhupada said when we chant Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama could mean Balaram, Rama could mean Ramachandra, Rama could mean Radharaman Krishna. And he said people who argue about this, about which Rama this Ram refers to, are less intelligent, he actually said. So it could refer to any or all of them. As Gaudiya Vaishnavas, we tend to think of Rama as Radharaman Krishna in Vrindavan, but they're all suitable according to the devotee and according to the mood of the devotee at the particular time. Is that all right?
Yeah, that's all right. So here yagna, which mentioned like since yagna is the incarnation of Lord Vishnu, and Lord Vishnu is the incarnation of Krishna, I mean expanded from Krishna. So when we do that sacrifice of yagna, it goes to this name of the yagna, what we are reading in the 7th incarnation. And that, since that is the branch of our incarnation and expansion from Krishna, so it goes to the Krishna finally. Is that the correct understanding, Prabhu?
Yes and no. I don't think that just because this particular incarnation has the name Yagya, that every time we do anything that's called a Yagya, it goes to him first, and then to Vishnu, and then to Krishna. The Yagya goes where the performer of Yagya desires and plans and meditates on it to go. It's not that every Yagya, every fire sacrifice we do has to go, through the son of Akuti and Ruchi before reaching Krishna. No, we do everything directly to Krishna through his incarnation. Everything is also through his incarnations, through his devotees. But just because he's named Yagya doesn't mean that every Yagya has to be channeled through him before it goes anywhere else. I don't think that that's what is meant here.
Okay, Prabhuji. Thank you, Prabhu, for clarifying. Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna, Prabhu. My humble pranam. Glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Sorry.
Krishna again. Thank you so much for explaining about the yajna. And you always do a lot of research and explain a lot of things to us. Thank you for that. And I have a question regarding your Sanskrit dictionary, because I have been looking for, I love Sanskrit, so I have been looking for some kind of dictionary in that. If you have anything valuable, any reference, any Sanskrit dictionary I can refer to, I would appreciate you giving me.
There are several good online Sanskrit dictionaries. I'll give you the name of the one I use. None of these are absolute knowledge. They're just, useful Sanskrit dictionaries.
Okay.
The best Sanskrit dictionary is, when you're reading Srimad Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita, is to include the word for word translation as part of your reading. And in that way, you'll naturally develop a decent Sanskrit vocabulary. But the one that I use usually, let me call up the link here. learnsanskrit.cc. You could try that and see if you find it useful.
Okay, learnsanskrit.cc.
Yes, Sanskrit spelled Sanskrit.
Sure, yes.
I find
Thank
that a convenient and useful, and it also links. It's an online dictionary, but it also links to more complete Sanskrit dictionaries like the Monier-Williams is the most famous, and some others. So that's a useful resource. But like I said, if you read, when you're reading Prabhupada's books, if you read the word for word translations also, you'll automatically start developing to some degree a vocabulary.
Yeah, I mean, when I was in India, when I was studying in college, I had my second language is Sanskrit.
Oh.
So we used to read all kinds of scriptures or anything in Sanskrit. My lecturers used to explain everything to us. You know, in those days we used to speak in Sanskrit, but not now. I have forgotten most of it.
That's hard to do.
Yeah.
And one thing, especially Bhagavad Gita, if you study Sanskrit, you know that the Bhagavad Gita is also often used in teaching Sanskrit, because the Sanskrit used in it is actually, I wouldn't say simple, but it's very direct and straightforward and understandable. And probably most of us here, if we read a verse from Bhagavad Gita, we probably know the meaning of most of the words, and even without reading the translation, can probably piece together some of the meaning of the verse just from what we know.
Yes, that's true. That's why I started loving Srila Prabhupada's books, because I had interest in Sanskrit. I always wanted to go back and know more about it because I had forgotten so many things. And you when you go for word translation, and it stays with you, you know, it comes back to you. So
yes, it definitely helps.
Our greatest thanks to Srila Prabhupada. Yes. Thank you. And you have explained pretty good. So thank you.
And that was why Prabhupada was very insistent on that being included in his Bhagavad Gita.
Yes.
Prabhupada had the opportunity to print his Bhagavad Gita quite early with, Macmillan. But because they took over the printing of it, a lot of it was edited, including the word for word translations being removed. And Prabhupada did it because it allowed a very wide distribution of his book, but he wasn't happy about it. And when his BBT took over the printing, he always insisted on that being part of it, the word for word translation. For a more thorough understanding, you can understand where the meaning is coming from, where the purport is coming from better when you can see the word for word meaning. And it also gives authority to it, that he's not just creating this out of his own head, but there's actually a cultural and linguistic and intellectual and philosophical basis behind all of it. So yes, it's an important part. Not that we have to become Sanskrit scholars, and I'm certainly not. I just dabble, but it's nice to know a little bit when we can. Hare Krishna. Anything else?
Thank you so much, Prabhu.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else? It's getting a little late, so. Any announcements or anything, Jonah Prabhu, for the great Sunday feast?
Yes, it looks like the weather is clear today, so everything should be dry by this evening. So we'll be serving the Sunday feast outside on the front lawn. We invite you all to come to the program starting at 4:30. We have kirtan, we have japa. We have a special class tonight. Today is the disappearance day of Srivas Thakur. Srivas Thakur is an associate, very important associate of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And so we'll learn about him tonight. The class will be given by His Grace Vishnu Gada Prabhu. Also, the cuisine tonight being offered is today's the 4th of July. So in America, there's kind of just a tradition of kind of like more kind of picnic outdoor type of food. So that is going to be offered tonight to the Lord, different types of varieties like that. So please come on by. We look forward to seeing you all. And well, this again starts at 4:30 and goes to about 7:30.
Hi.
Acharya Prabhu, thank you so much. This
Thank you.
wasn't when you look at it on the surface, doesn't look like a very easy verse to prepare for, but you really brought out so much, so many of the important points that were kind of hidden and kind of maybe secretly embedded there. We really appreciate that very
Hare
much.
Krishna. It's always fun to look at a verse, and there's always, so many different angles and tacts you can take. Just like if you listen to Prabhupada's lectures, he'll lecture on the same verse multiple times, and he'll take so many different unique angles and analysis. So that's always fun to try and, figure out, what's being said here. What can I extract? Hare Krishna.
Thank you
Thank you very much, everybody. for
Thank you
attending.
very much, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Machakopatrubhischa, Kripasindhuvevicha, Patitanam Pavanebhyo, Vaishnavebhyo, Namo Namaha.
Thank you. Hare Krishna. Have a
Have
nice
a
day.
great day.